I want to tell you about a currency crisis. And it's not an economic one, it's a human one. So I recently read a report from the World Health Organization that said that 1 in 6 people are currently experiencing loneliness. That's about 17% of the world's total population. And I found it so interesting because we live in a world that has never been more connected than ever before. So you may have thousands of friends online, yet nobody that you can call in the middle of the night when you're feeling lonely. Why? Because we've been trading in the wrong currency. We've been trading in perfection, in credentials, in looking like we have it all figured out. But perfection is becoming increasingly worthless because everybody has it now. Everybody is perfectly polished, perfectly filtered, perfectly curated. What's actually valuable? Vulnerability. And the problem is we hoard this vulnerability. We're too afraid to spend it, too afraid of how we'll be perceived. So we just keep it to ourselves. You see it in rooms like this one, where, for example, your lecturer or the speaker will ask you, like I'm going to ask you now, do you understand what I'm saying? Are you with me? And we all nod our heads like we understand, but really we're completely lost. Because admitting that confusion feels like admitting weakness. And then you see it in project teams when you're preparing for something, or in study groups when you're preparing for an exam, and I'm used to be very guilty of this. And the team lead will say, are we on track? Have you done your part? Are you ready to deliver by the deadline? And nobody wants to confess that they're absolutely drowning. They're overwhelmed, and they don't even know how they're going to make it in time. And then you see it in relationships. Let's talk about this phenomenon that completely baffles me that we've invented called the talking stage, right? Where you see 2 people, they clearly like each other, they're spending time together, but nobody wants to make it official. Nobody wants to put a label on it. They just want to play it cool, act unbothered, see where things go. And to me, I've always found it funny. I see it as the ultimate standoff. Because you've got 2 people sitting on these fortunes just waiting to see who's going to be the first person to invest it. Because we've been taught that you have to be the hard guy. If you show her too many emotions, then she's going to take advantage of you. And we've been taught that you have to be the sharp girl. Take it easy. Don't let him know that you like him too much. But the problem is, nobody tells you that while you are hoarding this currency, keeping it locked away and not spending it, it's doing absolutely nothing. It's not growing, it's not compounding. In fact, it's dying, and it's taking all of your real, true connections with it. And I say this from experience because I know too well about hoarding vulnerability. I've done it many times in my life, and 2 times stand out to me. One of those times, it almost killed me, literally. So let me take you back. Let me take you on a journey to 2020. I had just pivoted my career from law to tech. And I had started a brand called The D-Lo, centered around my life as a millennial mom and a wife, sharing my journey. And I shared real stuff, real juicy stories. Like, for example, the fight that my husband and I had on our court wedding day that ended up with me standing on the side of the road in my wedding dress. Yes, I know. But I shared that kind of stuff, and people loved it. They found it to be a breath of fresh air, somebody keeping it real for once, somebody just being authentic. And then something happened. I took my daughter for a routine checkup at the doctor's, and she was diagnosed with flat head syndrome. And then from that day, everything fell apart for me because I was your typical Google mother. Millennials know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of moms that Google everything. And one of those things that I read online about was safe sleep. And the online medical research experts said that when you have a child, you have to lie that child on their back always. That's the safest way to sleep. Now, I had my mother with me at the time, and you know African mother, she told me, lay this child on her stomach. Nothing is gonna happen. I did it to you and you survived, look at you. But being a typical millennial, I followed the advice of the online experts over my mother. And now I was in a situation where my daughter had to wear a helmet to reshape her head for 23 out of the 24 hours of a day. And I felt so guilty. I felt to blame. I felt like I caused it. And that was the first layer of shame. The second layer of shame, as you will see on screen, was my daughter's turbans. Now, I had created a whole content identity around these turbans. The picture that you will see, where she looks like she was just born, was literally the day that she was born. And from that day, I matched her turbans with her outfits, and everybody loved it. They found it so cute. And it was her thing, but it was also our thing. And now I was faced with a situation whereby my daughter had to wear this helmet, and she only had 1 hour break in a day. So I had to ask myself, was I really going to use this 1 hour to start filming content and put a turban on her? Well, that was the second layer of shame. The third layer, which for me was the deepest, was that I had built this whole identity, this whole brand around keeping it real, around being authentic. But I could not share this because this was a mess that I couldn't control. This wasn't like the fight that me and my husband had on our court wedding day, where I could spin it to make me look good and put a moral story at the end, make everybody laugh. This was a serious situation. This was, I listened to online experts over the wisdom of my mother. My daughter now has a medical condition, and I caused it. I failed. And I didn't know how to spin that. I had no redemption story, no angle, just shame that I felt that I couldn't package very well. So I just disappeared completely. No posts, no story. I completely disappeared. And people kept on asking me, what's happened to you guys? Where are you and Tiara and the turbans? We miss you. You've gone silent. And I would either not say anything or I would just tell them that we're on a break. I couldn't tell them the truth about what was happening because I couldn't control how that truth would land. And you know we've been talking about costs. Well, this really cost me because the brand that I had built around the D-Lo suffered because after my disappearing act, it took me years to feel the confidence to come out and share anything again. The community around me couldn't even support me because I never ever admitted that I needed support in the first place. And even my mom, who was with me at the time going through this whole thing, couldn't even tell me, look, this is not your fault. Because I didn't even give her the chance because I never admitted how guilty I felt about causing this problem. And that is what happens when you hoard your vulnerability. It always comes at a cost. And I didn't know at that time that it was going to cost me something bigger in the future. So let me take you a little bit further now to December 2023. Same kind of situation as the helmet, but the stakes were much higher than this time. I found a lump, and immediately I knew that something was horribly wrong, but I said nothing. For months, didn't tell anybody. I just hoarded this secret to myself and kept it silent. And I'm sure you're wondering, why on earth, after all that you know about these kind of things, why on earth didn't you say anything? Well, firstly, I didn't want pity from anyone. I didn't want anyone looking at me with a sad face, like, oh, what's going on with you? And then secondly, I felt like if I didn't voice it out, it wouldn't feel as real anymore. So I just hoarded it. And instead, I did what I did best at the time. I started performing, showing up to work, showing up to events, posting on social media like nothing was going on. If you saw my pictures around that time, you'd think I was perfectly fine. Meanwhile, I was keeping this deep secret that was eating me up inside until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. And In the middle of the night, I woke up literally swimming and drowning with fear and anxiety, like, look, this is actually serious and you've left this too long. So I woke up my husband in the middle of the night and I told him 3 simple words: I need help. And from that moment, things started to move incredibly quickly. We packed up right there, went straight to the hospital, and started what would be a series of medical tests. And I was scared, but I had somebody that I could share the load with. I could finally breathe. So the day came for me to get my results, and the doctor came in, and as you know, if you've ever been to the doctor's office and had results being told to you, they always have a poker face. I tried to read it, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I'll never forget how it felt hearing the words, "I'm so sorry, but I think the test results show that you have an 80% likelihood of having cancer. We have to move really fast." So at that time, I had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I had to leave them and travel halfway across the world to start another series of medical investigations. And the months that I had waited, they almost cost me my life. So I was forced to surrender control. And it's funny, beautiful things happened when I did. My husband, who as a typical dad used to pretend that he doesn't know how to do certain things, well, at the time that I was gone, he stepped up and he started doing them. My friends, my inner circle, they stepped in and literally became mothers to my children so they didn't feel my absence, especially during Christmas. And then my family, they rallied around and supported me in a way that I had never imagined before. And then a couple of months later, after the separation, I went again to the doctor's office for my final results. And it came in that it was all clear. The lump was benign. And those same people were the people that lifted me up, that cried with me, that rejoiced with me, that celebrated with me, all because I had let them in. See, the thing is about this whole situation, that lump almost killed me, not because of what it might have been, but because of the fact that I was keeping this secret inside and it was eating up inside of me. I was literally dying. And I learned a lesson out of this whole thing that has always resonated with me. Authenticity is controlled vulnerability. Vulnerability is when you surrender control. See, on the D-Lo, I thought I was being authentic because I was sharing real stories about my life, and they were raw, they were real. But the difference was these were stories I could control, I could put a spin on it, make everybody laugh. The helmet situation, that was an insecurity that I didn't even know that I had at the time, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to package it, and I ended up retreating. So after everything, after my cancer scare, I actually became fearless. Those kind of things will do that to you. But it wasn't just because of the trauma that I had been through. It was not in some kind of superhero way. It was in the everyday things, like putting up my hand in rooms that ordinarily I would have been shrinking, or standing up for myself, setting boundaries, asking for things that I want. And as a result of that, after the whole situation, great things started happening. I got admitted into the Forbes Agency Council, started winning numerous awards. And it wasn't because I developed some incredible strength or became perfect. It was because I understood and I realized and stopped needing to be. So I'm sure you are wondering how you can start spending this currency. And don't worry, I'm not going to hoard it from you. I'll share it. There are 3 things that I want to leave with you that will help you to start transacting like this in your everyday lives. First of all, you need to start understanding yourself and recognizing the performance. When you're about to be vulnerable, it's not easy. It's those times when you're scared to hit send, when you don't know how to pick up the phone, when the words can't come out. That's when you're taking a risk, and that's when you know you're about to spend real currency. If you already have an angle to it and you know how it's going to land and you've already pictured the response, then potentially you're still performing. Now, the second thing that's important to understand is the line between vulnerability and oversharing. And that's a real danger that I don't want to ignore. The key thing is when you're being vulnerable, you are sharing the scar. You're not sharing the open wound while you're still bleeding. And when you understand that difference, you will know who you can be vulnerable with. Because when you're vulnerable with the wrong people, you're actually giving them ammunition to use against you before you've even built up any armor. And that can be terrible. It will cause you to retreat. And then, when you retreat, you're going to start blaming vulnerability itself. And trust me, vulnerability is not the problem. You're going to say that I was open to this person and they used it against me, and look what's happened now. But it's not because you were vulnerable. It's because you were exposed. You exposed yourself. So the third thing is to trust the transaction. See, when you're being vulnerable with people, although we call it a transaction, you're not trying to be transactional. You're not trying to get anything out of anybody. You understand that in this space that you create, where you're being vulnerable, you are giving other people the permission to do the same thing. And when that happens, that is when real support shows up. That is when you see the value of the transaction, and that is when great things start happening. So I want to leave you with the final question that I often have to ask myself. What are you still hoarding? I have a feeling that you already know, and I have a stronger feeling that you knew the minute that I asked the question. That one thing, that one conversation that you've been avoiding, what would happen if you let go? Not today, not tomorrow, but when you need to. What would happen if you stopped suffering in silence and decided to just open up a little bit more and stop performing? Because the thing about performance is the wealth that you can buy with it will bring you applause. But the thing about vulnerability is the wealth that you can buy with it will bring you support. And ultimately, that's more important. The life that you think about when you close your eyes and sleep every night, that best version of yourself that you picture yourself being, the freedom, the connection, the courage, the experiences, the relationships that you've always wanted, that is what sits on the other side of that truth that you are too afraid to tell. Thank you.